to remind you that we are being filmed, and therefore if anybody doesn't want to be filmed and appear on our website, they should leave the room now. Item 3 is announcements. I haven't got any. Anybody else with announcements? Okay. Public questions, I don't think there are any. Urgent items, not aware of any. Items to be considered in the absence of the public and press, don't think there are any of those either. Declarations of interest, over and above what we're already fine. Item 8 then, minutes of the Public Accountability Board held on the 27th of September. That's pages 1 to 14. First of all, in terms of their accuracy, are they an accurate, true representation of what took place last time?
There was just one for me on page 4.
Yep.
So on the third paragraph,
Yep.
there was a query about satisfaction, and I'm attributed as M. Roberts highlighted that for some people it was a positive outcome if someone has gone to court.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure that makes sense.
Right. Have you got an alternative wording?
I think it's to reflect the fact that probably satisfaction isn't entirely determined by the outcome of court. Clearly for some people it is an important aspect, but satisfaction is much broader than that. So I would hazard a guess at.
Can you give us an alternative sentence or something that we...
Yeah, should I drop you a line?
Yeah, thank you very much. Anything else as to accuracy? Okay. We come then to the matters arising or the actions from minutes, which is pages 15 and 16.
I'll take these, Commissioner. The first one on there, 332, is being discharged, so that's completed in relation to discussions that we're going to be taken to the LCJB. Next one, 348, arose from the Rotherham performance report at the October PAB. There was a shared performance report that Superintendent Steve Chapman mentioned, which sounded like a partner report on the neighbourhood service. We just need to receive that.
Yeah, I've reviewed the report and it's not really appropriate for further dissemination because of the level of detail in it.
No, it's just for the OPCC and the PCC
yeah,
to see.
But
right.
There are, if we can have a chat, Michelle, I'll go through what's in it. But the report itself, there is a performance element to it, but it does contain an awful lot of personal data about vulnerability individuals. Okay. So it's not really...
Do you want to sort of...
So if we can have a chat separately,
sure.
When maybe Michelle comes up, we can chat through it.
That's fine. And then finally, the 350 was in relation to the serious and organised crime outcome within the police and crime plan. There were gaps in the reporting that we just need to agree with the force. I've had an email exchange with ACC Forborough and we're meeting next week to discuss that further. Although we're getting close to the end of the performance year where we're setting measures for next year now, so I think it's a conversation I'll also have with the Deputy Chief Constable. And then finally, there was mention here of Your Voice Counts survey and the declining levels of confidence in the criminal justice system. We have had some results come back. We are going to repeat some of the questions, but on early results, the police are looking the agency within the criminal justice system that has the most confidence, possibly because they're the most visible, but we're just probing in relation to that. There's also victim and witness support that we want to probe around, because clearly that goes to your responsibilities around commissioning victim services commissioner. So that's in hand, and when Phil Townsend from the force gets back on the 3rd of December, we're going to progress that further.
Okay. Everybody happy with that? Thank you very much. Item 10 then is the PAB work programme, 17 to 20. Anything new or
No, that's always a look ahead for the next 3 months. The planning timetable will take a lot of the reports, as well as the usual performance reporting from the force. We are looking as an office with you, Commissioner, in relation to streamlining the Public Accountability Board, but that's wrapped up in a proposal around assurance arrangements generally, which should come to you in the next fortnight.
Okay. Well, we moved then to the Police and Crime Delivery Plan delivery. I suppose that makes sense. For 2018, the current financial year. That's item 11. Forced performance, the Barnsley District summary and performance update, and the Commander of Barnsley, Scott Green, is with us. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
So it's your report, and assume everybody's read it, and if you want to take us to some of the highlights, we'll immerse ourselves in Barnsley.
Thank you, Commissioner. Chief Constable, colleague, good morning. So at section 3 of the report, the graphs speak for themselves, which show a sustained and continued reduction in the number of crime times. What I want to highlight actually was the comments at 3.1, which is a result of 3 things. So the first one is the collective activities of neighbourhood policing, and us being within Barnsley 2 years down the road of restoring a significant neighbourhood policing footprint. The second is really positive proactivity around offenders, and particularly offender management within communities and offenders coming out of prison. And thirdly is the strong investigative delivery, which is a direct result of the return of CID assets back to local command. Any of the district commanders sat here a year ago would have talked about residential burglary and tried to outline the complexities of the change in definition. The chart at the bottom of page 21, in relation to burglary residential, now includes 2 years of the change in definition. What that highlights is, on a monthly average, we're having around 100 less burglary residential offences than we were a year ago, which is a significant step change in the amount recorded burglary. The other charts,
So can you just pause you on burglary, just get a sense of this, because it's hard to, I mean, that's good, burglaries are down in Barnsley, but to get some sense of where South Yorkshire is in relation to other parts of the country, other forces, we're still pretty high in terms of burglaries, Deputy Chief.
Yeah, I think we are high in regards to the whole country. I think MSG, we're coming more on line with them, and I think we're one of the fewer forces that are actually showing a decrease in some of the areas, Barnsley, as Scott said. But it has been a concerted effort that we do still investigate burglaries. We do put emphasis on it. As a consequence, I think each of the districts have seen
we're about
improvement.
5th, would that be right? In terms of comparisons, we're about 5th in the...
Nationally, or
yes,
I'd have to check the MSG data.
Okay. Sorry.
just to expand on burglary residential from Barnsley perspective as well, of those monthly figures, a significant number of them are sheds being broken into. And whilst I don't diminish that, the definition of burglary residential includes any building within the confines of a house. And actually the profile of residential burglary in Barnsley is that a lot of those are shed burglaries as opposed to the intrusive nature of somebody's house.
Do we know what the split is? Because clearly when you say burglary, I think most people would think it's my house we're talking about, not my shed. But
I could check the exact data. My sense is it's around about 50-50 in Barnsley. So about half of our burglaries are actually sheds being broken into, which is significantly less intrusive. Just a serious from our perspective, it's significantly less intrusive than victims.
The problem we have with the national definitions, obviously we're governed by those, because exactly the sort of comparison you've just asked for, we need to go on the national benchmark. So the national definition was changed, as Scott said, about 2 years ago, so we now are actually comparing like for like in terms of the trend data, so that we can see the positive trend. To unpick that, we'd have to build some more reports, go and get different things, which we can do on an ad hoc basis for the tactical data, but that really drives some inefficiency if we're building up reporting sets that go beyond what we're asked for nationally.
and the it's what's in the shed. It's tools, is it, that people have to essentially?
It could be bikes for scrap. It could be whatever. It's quite a difficult one, and we don't diminish it. But as Scott says, I think there's a difference between that type of offence and actually someone's home being invaded. But we record against the national categories as set down by Home Office and HMIC.
So for some people, their home is their shed.
Well, if they live in it,
that's a rhetorical question. Just leave it.
No, but if they live in it, it's the home.
No, I didn't think. Well, they sort of live in it. Yes.
Oh, sorry. I thought get you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So the remaining charts then on page 22, I've included those to highlight one at the significant lower levels, particularly alongside Barnsley's MSG neighbours, but also to show that the reductions have been sustained now over a 2-year period. Moving on to 3.3 then, since our last report to this board, we've not yet had an additional quarter's data in relation to your voice count and our confidence measure. But as I said the last time I was here, Superintendent Plum was here the time before, our concerted effort around our confidence plan is on the east of Barnsley, where we have a lower level of confidence than we do in the west. We continue to work there. In relation to satisfaction of 3.4, overall satisfaction, particularly for Burberry Welling, is very high, it's 87%. Like other areas of the force, we have seen a slight drop in the most recent data set, which we're working hard to understand. We have had a satisfaction plan for about 2 years, which is regularly refreshed, and that's enhanced further by our 12-week delivery plan, which we're reporting back into Mr. Hartley for. In relation to neighbourhood policing, our neighbourhood policing footprint, underpinned by our Safer Neighbourhood Service, is now a matured model. It's been reviewed twice by Sheffield Hallam University, and we're really pleased with the direction that it's taken in. But I just wanted to highlight at page 23 and 24 the resources that we've committed to it. So under the local policing unit model, we have 2 inspectors, no sergeants, no constables, 42 PCSOs. As we sit here today, we've got 2 inspectors, 6 sergeants, 25 PCs, 700 PCSOs, plus the licensing officer, hate crime, design and crime, and partnership analyst, which is an additional 35 staff and officers. It's made a significant difference to us across the policing of Barnsley. 4.7.
Can I just ask about that? Since we have increased police numbers, they must have come from somewhere. What's the effect of doing this?
From my perspective, Barnsley being the first district to do it, it was in effect a leap of faith to move some response officers into neighbourhoods to bring about sustained reductions. We've seen sustained reductions both in terms of demand and crime data over 2 years. And at 4.6, I've just set out what our collective ambition is, which is earlier this year we reopened Cudworth Police Station and put an additional neighbourhood policing team in there, and again those 5 officers came from our response teams, and I think that needs to be our collective ambition. So both as Barnsley District Commander but also as the Force Business Lead for Neighbourhood Policing, the introduction of neighbourhood policing and sustained work on our reduction plans, working together with partners and communities, brings about that level of reduction, which has allowed us to take 1 officer per team out of response policing, still meet daily demand, but also have a further footprint. And in 12 months' time, my intention is to review it again, come to chief officers and say, actually, I don't know, either we can take some more out or we can't, but that needs to be our collective ambition, is to keep
I mean, that really does underpin the whole ethos behind the policing model that we've gone for, because we had more people on response just chasing the tails, just going to the same thing. And a very simplistic example would be, without a neighbourhood team, you'll have officers going at the same location 10 times. Well, actually, with the neighbourhood team, what should happen is maybe officers go twice, it gets referred to the neighbourhood team, and then the neighbourhood team go and ask the question, why are we coming back? And then with partners, we do the problem solving. The partners have been trained as well as officers. Scott's Safe Neighbourhood team, they will look at things in terms of a longer term approach, and that links into our approach to problem solving and demand reduction. So had you said at the start of the process we're going to take 30-35 people off response in Barnsley, the staff would have said it's impossible, we'll collapse. Well, we've done it, and we're now actually driving demand reduction, because as Scott's articulated, we believe the fundamental logic of the approach is demand reduction. You then free up time, then you can put more people in. The communities get a better service because they have community police officers that they can relate to, and hopefully you start a virtuous cycle instead of a negative one.
It's a scary decision.
Well, it's a decision.
A leap of faith, you call it, rather than a scary decision.
Yeah, but no, but I think we're satisfied with the logic, because there is a logic, and I think across the command team we've done it in other places, and you know it'll work. What we need is people like Scott to hold the nerve, stick to the plan, and do it, and manage it locally to make sure the staff come with us. So that's the real value of district command structures and district people to actually do it. So I think we had every confidence that it was the right approach. It was just getting the balance right between numbers, and I think that probably speaks to the value of the investment we've made in the change and demand management teams, that we do this with a degree of science to go along with the professional judgment. And I think that's probably written through all the areas of business, that we've done it in a systematic way to underpin the theory. So
So far, so good.
so far so good.
Just to round that point off, Commissioner, I'd just like to draw everybody's attention to 4.7. So between May 2018 and September 2018, they experienced 4 homicides, a really high-profile critical incident in the town centre, and a very tragic fatal road traffic accident involving an HGV. It does say in that paragraph that they all remain sub judice. Of course they don't, because we had convictions last week for the murder of Freed, which resulted into 2 life sentences, but the others are all sub judice. What I wanted to highlight really is that the sustained demand reduction that we brought about from neighbourhood policing teams meant that we were able to cope with the increased demand from all of those incidents, which was actually quite sustained and unprecedented. But perhaps more importantly, the links with local communities meant that the district was able to monitor closely community tensions throughout that entire period. And my view is, under our previous operating model, we have struggled significantly to cope with that extraordinary demand. A question, section 5 then, I wanted to touch on some of the key community issues. From my perspective, feedback from communities, from members, from survey results and social media indicate that the perception and the actual use of spice in the town centre remains a real concern. We have a significant and complex partnership plan, both with the third sector, with drug and alcohol services, and of course with the local authority, to address the issues associated with spice. One of our roles within that is, of course, enforcement, but this is and remains a complex issue. Some of the challenges include limited options for treatment orders for those that are using spice. The behaviour through this substance does often not meet a criminal threshold. It's not the same as somebody that's drunk and disorderly, because of the state they have to find themselves in. Custodial sentences are often brief, and perhaps most importantly, spice is very cheap. So we have had successes in terms of arrests around the supply of drugs, and we continue to work with the council, with your office, Commissioner, with the College of Policing and other colleagues, as we continue to seek to strive to tackle what is and remains a complex issue.
Is there any sign of that there's an even stronger strain? I think it's monkey dust is how it's referred to, which people become more aggressive when they take it. Is there any sign that that's made its way to Barnsley, South Yorkshire?
The danger is none of this stuff comes with a kite mark, so it's whatever's been knocked up in the relevant lab wherever it might be around the world. So we're always really wary about making generic statements about any of these substances, because frankly you never know what they're taking. You do see trends, you'll get bad batches, you'll get various spikes of things, but one of the messages to constantly get across to the public is you just don't know what you're taking, and literally you could take it, could kill you. That's the...
But the effect of this is that people generally fall over and lie on the pavement, and that's very disturbing for people.
Well, not always.
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. I mean, you talk to the prisons, and their impression of it is very much different. So you can't make generalisations about what it does to people.
Thank you. Just moving on then to engagement. Barnsley has a 3-tier engagement model, so packed meetings, of course, which we coordinate. The crime and safety groups, which are an important feature of engagement within Barnsley, because they're organised by local communities and often chaired by members of the public, with us supporting, and then of course more formal groups like the town centre groups. The last time I was here, I talked about the work that we've taken around rural crime, and the fact that we'd organised a virtual rural crime pact meeting. We've tried that again, so during the recent Duxford on the 10th of October we held another online pact meeting, and whilst there were relatively few questions, over 1,000 people interacted with the pact meeting, which has given us an opportunity to get differing views give updates out in a different way. We're now reviewing that together with the media team, and we'll try again in the future. So for me, the use of online pack meetings is an additional tool alongside normal pack meetings. It's not something I'd see us doing on every occasion, but I think for those high profile things, I think it's a really useful thing to do.
So where you have a pact online or not, the information that comes out of those, you do stuff with it.
Absolutely, yeah. And the online pact one, it was the first time that we've done one to that scale. It was a really useful exercise, really useful learning. The important thing is that actually we learn both about the process that we follow, the work that we did with the media team, and actually the stuff that came out of it, particularly when we're doing Duxford, because it gives us an opportunity to influence future Duxford operations about where we put our resources.
You mentioned the role of Duxford.
Yes.
Yes, I covered that in a previous report. We'll probably do it again in the springtime.
Because that was
The
most recent one was really
Duxford, yeah.
really positive, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So that's where we are with engagement. Community alerts, we continue to use it and try and find the balance between giving out crime data, giving out engagement updates and local initiatives to try and find that right balance between useful things to tell the public. In terms of criminal investigation, the capacity in Barnsley has changed significantly. You'll see at 7.3. So in terms of CID, I've got 1 detective inspector, 4 sergeants, 23 constables, and 2 financial investigator posts. And our PVP strength is 1 DI, 4 detective sergeants, 12 detective constables, and 12 investigating officers. Having them all together has given us flexibility around both managing acquisitive crime, offender management, and also some of the serious issues that we've touched upon.
Where do you get the civilian investigating officers from? Do they come? What sort of background do they have?
Well, in terms of the recruitment, you'll be aware that we've made the investment with the universities in terms of the
where they come from, then?
so the development programme, which is quite, if not unique, certainly novel around the country, and that was again part of the investigation review that we'd identified the need for increased capacity with investigative resources, so we've invested in investigative officers, which has given us some of that additional capacity.
So this is Sheffield University, Sheffield Hallam as well, or?
Oh, which one is it?
It's Hallam.
Hallam, I think it's Hallam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that you think that's unique in the country then?
We're doing it with Durham. I think it might be unique, but you never know, there might be one lurking somewhere. But it's not common practice, but I think it is giving us that pipeline that we're hopeful. I mean, originally we did do some events to try and identify investigators from other non-policing bodies. I think we had limited success with that, but it is proving a successful avenue for us.
Yeah, I was talking to some school young people not so very long ago about potential careers in the police force, and all they could think of were police officers. They had no concept of anything else that goes on in South Yorkshire. I thought that was such a shame, but this is one way of breaking that down.
Okay. Last couple of points from me. 7.6, I just wanted to highlight that we will have all seen significant national coverage regarding violent crime. From my perspective as the Barnsley Commander, we've seen no significant increase at all, nothing that can be linked to gang or organised criminality. We record low levels of knife crime, low levels of firearms offences, and low levels of drugs and personal robbery rates. The final paragraph is to look at the demand at 7.8 from a slightly different perspective. So whilst in terms of our monitoring of community tensions and our ability to manage daily demand as a result of the demand reduction and reintroduction of neighbourhood policing. The increase that we saw in terms of high profile investigations from May 2018, with the return of local CID resources and the operating model that the force has now today, we were able to, with support from specialist crime services, investigate effectively all those homicides, the very serious incident in the town centre, but at the same time meet business as usual for our investigators every day throughout the summer, which for me is a testament to our operating model, because we were able to monitor tensions, dealing with our daily demand, but importantly still process our normal CID prisoners that come through the door and our daily demand in a model that allowed us to flex a little bit, bring in specialist resources, but keep business as usual going throughout that busy time. That's it from me, Commissioner.
Thank you very much indeed. I think I've asked my questions as we went along. Does anybody else have any?
Just one, Commissioner. Scott, yesterday at the Fire and Rescue Authority, the Commissioner and I heard about the new fire community support officers that are going into the hubs, and the demand reduction problem solving was raised there in the public meeting. I just wondered whether we're getting engagement from health satisfactorily within those hubs, as well as the fire and rescue service around community safety issues.
Probably not as engaged as local authority was and fire service. From my own perspective, that's probably a reflection on some of the structures within health, so CCGs and a big hospital. That said, on a very local level, our relationship with Barnsley Hospital is fantastic. We're a big service provider, and our mental health services in Barnsley are provided by SWIFT, which is the South West Yorkshire Foundation Trust, and again they're well represented certainly at the community safety levels.
Yeah.
And we've got ongoing discussions regarding representation at our Safe and Open service. So it's not an issue that I feel I need to escalate. So I'm fairly confident we're on the right track.
Okay, thank you. And relationships with Barnsley Local Authority are very good, aren't they? Police, and you have regular meetings,
Yes.
etc. And they all speak well of police when I meet council leaders. So good. I think that's everything. Thank you very much indeed. It's good to have a very positive report, I think. And good to see you at the Proud of Barnsley Awards. It was a very good evening.
It's very good.
Noisy and lots of flashing lights, but I mean, I went home at 10 o'clock. I don't know. Anyway, we won't go down. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So moving on then to item 12, which is the force performance, efficiency, effectiveness and value for money. This is pages 27 to 62. It's quite a lengthy document. Nigel, I think you'll get a...
Yeah, I will.
So, well, assume we've all read it, and perhaps if we sort of do it section by section, just to see what questions are. That's right. Well,
Okay.
first of all, thank you for the report. It's quite long and quite dense. It's kind of sort of War and Peace without the romance, I guess. But anyway, it's
Just got the action.
okay, right. So if we start on the first part of the report is talking about the general financial situation. We had this raised at the Fire Authority yesterday.
Yeah.
Everybody is saying, in fact, the Fire Authority yesterday they were saying that a year ago they were producing reports that talked about cautious optimism as they were looking forward. Yesterday they were talking about anything but optimism. It was a very pessimistic and slightly doom-laden report. But you're saying something similar here about the general financial situation.
Yeah, and I think what is particularly helpful this time, first of all, I think it's worth formally recording that we did pass our statutory test for value for money
Yes.
as part of the accounts. But in section 4, they're not our figures, they're the figures from the National Audit Office in their national report. And you very often hear Surrey talking about how they haven't got the resources they need, but they've had the lowest reduction in policing resources in the country, where only 6 forces or 6 commissioners have had a bigger reduction in resources than South Yorkshire Police.
I think that's a very dramatic table, actually.
Yeah.
It shows the position very well indeed.
Yeah, and practically that's meant the force has had to make savings, or the force and the commissioner have had to make savings equivalent to £84 million a year. And where would we be now if we've got £84 million more to invest in our services?
Well, I'd be in the Bahamas. Where would you be? Yeah, no, it's a point well made. Okay. So, strategic priorities?
That just repeats your priorities.
Okay. Do you want to take us to
Yeah.
some of these?
Yeah, I'll just take you through the highlights, shall I? Item 6 is about joint and effective services, principally, and where we're getting better use of resources. First thing we'd like to say is that we've now actually got a very effective tool which has been accepted by the region to evaluate our collaborations. We've got a collaboration board chaired by the Deputy Chief Constable, and that's providing real reassurance to both the Chief Constable and yourself that the collaborations are doing what they were supposed to do. So over time, collaborations move and change, and as I repeatedly say, a lot of successful collaborations are always about good relationships, and when you get new command teams, relationships change. 6.4 tries to highlight one of the things which we perhaps haven't been as good in recent years of highlighting is all the productivity gains we're getting, because we talk a lot about cash, and whilst a large part of our cash has actually been doing more or doing the same with the same amount of resources, there are some which have been bold cuts, reductions in service. But actually in paragraph 6.4 we have got a host of initiatives which have been taking place in the last 12 months in the force, which show how district commanders, departmental heads are actually driving out productivity gains. And in future, HMIC and the Home Office can spend far more time on productivity gains. And there's things like the efficiency Lawrence teams have made in Atlas Court with changes to the diary system, how we've changed the way we're dealing with mental health prisoners, which of course is a national report issued today, which is giving us productivity. How Sheffield have changed the way they manage sickness, which has seen a 13% reduction in sickness, and how we've been...
Can you just explain the bridge?
Sheffield, it's making use of officers on restricted duties for whatever reason to actually take some of the functionality that ties down officers who are out and about, takes up their time, so they'll be looking at how they can manage some of the office type functions, making sure that we're directing resources in the most optimal way.
Yes, it's all right, the pennies dropped. Yes, I have seen them, I've been there and talked. I didn't realise they were called the bridge, but
Yeah.
there we are.
Thank you. And you also see how, because of partnership arrangements with other people like the University, Meadowhall Centre, they're buying extra police services, which is actually giving us a productivity gain. And we've got a lot more detail on these, but
Yeah.
this is just a highlight.
Thank you for that. I think you're right to draw attention to non-cashable gains as well as cashable.
Yeah.
We don't always appreciate them or note them.
Next we're into financial planning, and I think one of the points I particularly wanted to make, we've spent a lot of time recently trying to improve the usability, the transparency of the information we provide, and historically our statements of accounts have been quite dull, boring things which haven't been popular, so we've actually for the first time produced a simple summary statement of accounts which is appended as an annex jointly with the OPCC, so that if people want it, just a quick snapshot. I know the Chief Constable has used this with the local business community, because they cannot often believe the size of the business of South Yorkshire Police in terms of the money we spend, the systems we have, and they were surprised when they actually looked at the summary statement of the accounts. We've also just agreed a revised insurance strategy. We're making improvements to our systems. The next thing will be all our expenses will be going self-service online, so you'll be able to take pictures of car park tickets, etc., append them to the system rather than paper documentation. In terms of estates we've made perhaps slow.
So just there's a reference in 711 to Jeff Berrett
Yeah.
leaving, so perhaps we could record here our thanks to Jeff for what he's done, the contribution he's made. Wish him well. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll pass that on to him. So in terms of estates, we've made perhaps slower progress than we would have liked. It's taken us a little bit longer. It took us a bit longer to recruit the new joint head of service with fire. We've carried on disposing surplus properties, which produces a revenue saving, but now we're at the stage where, being well in the next in the next month, we will have a new estates strategy which sets out the future direction of where we're wanting to go. And at the same time, we are implementing a new computer system which will give us far better control of the way we actually do the job, so all our operatives will have mobile devices to record all the work they're doing, and to give us a proper performance matrix, which we've never had for that service to date.
Hmm. And I think there is a new energy now in the estates in terms of the appointment there.
Yeah, there's a real energy, which is really good, and people are happy as well, I think.
People are happy.
Yeah, I think people, the staff working in the service feel they're being motivated with a good leader who is showing them the way forward. She talks through issues with them, and they can see the difference, because she is having the conversations with the senior command team and with yourself and your management team through like the estates board. They can say people are listening and they're getting noticed more, particularly when the heating goes down.
Well, we're not happy with the heating system. I mean, seriously, we're not happy.
Yeah.
It's really, really cold again this morning, Nigel. So, and I put my hands in the fridge before I came here just to warm up a little bit. It's as bad as that. So.
Right. I can assure you we are paying the bills. It then comes on to the savings and the capital programme.
We don't need to minute that, by the way.
We pay all our bills very promptly. In terms of our savings plan, we had a target for this year of 6.1 million at this moment in time. We're confident that we've delivered £5.8 million of those, and if you make it recurrent, it's about £6.5 million a year. So as we go into future years, there is some slippage on some of it. Capital programme, there has been some slippage, as Louise has been getting ahead of the estate strategy. Next year in particular, we're going to spend far more time designing things before the final sign-off, and I think we all know that one of our major IT problems had some delays in implementation, which has been very well contractual managed. We then come on to procurement, and there's a lengthy a lengthy section here on procurement, which shows in 1018 the reporting we have to do for the Home Office, which is done on a quarterly basis, and that all goes into the National Commercial Board. Paragraph 10.6, the regional unit and myself have taken over the national lead for vehicle fleet, and yesterday we had all the major car manufacturers, motorcycle manufacturers, van and lorry manufacturers with the National Association of Police Fleet Managers and Procurement, and we were getting supplier feedback on the next contract, because we're looking to, in around 18 months' time, put in place all the contractual arrangements for all the vehicles for the police service, which I think is a really high sign of confidence in our regional procurement unit, that something which is very visible, and because of the relationships we have, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, so all the involved governments coming into those contractual arrangements.
Nigel, going back to the table on page 37, there's various naught predictions. I presume that's to be confirmed rather than we're projecting to make no savings.
Yes,
Okay.
at this moment in time there is no certainty, so they're putting a degree of certainty. And I think the last thing I'd want to say on procurement is the section 10.7. Social value, following the Social Value Act, is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. We're going to pilot, on behalf of the service, a new tool on community engagement and customer engagement on that, and we're looking to put the sustainability officer alongside procurement to help that, and we'll be contacted. I know we want to involve each of the police and crime commissioners in the region in that, because that's one of the objectives all the 4 police and crime commissioners have. We then come on to fleet. Now a joint service with fire and rescue. We've now got a joint revised strategy signed off, and we're in the process at the moment of putting telematics on all our cars, which will then be followed by the fire fleet. And we think...
Just explain telematics. I mean, essentially, it's a tool for... Well, you tell me.
Telematics are a little black box which are connected using mobile phone technology, which shows us where all our vehicles are, where they've been, and it gives us a significant amount of management information because it links into our system, so we can look at where fuel's being used, where vehicles are parked with engines on, and it gives us a whole host of management information which will enable us to, for the first time, to have an accurate assessment of what the real need for using the fleet is, because there's all sorts of myths and legends about vehicles in car parks not being used. You get the same people will say they haven't got enough cars, so Sarah will have a whole set of tools to look at the effectiveness of the fleet.
So essentially, this is all the key data then?
Yes.
For determining use of
Yeah.
vehicles. And in theory, then, when I go to these community meetings and they say we've not had a police car in our village for 37 years, I'll be able to say, actually, it would be as precise as that, would it?
Well, I think we can probably do that sort of data from other means linked to the tracking of the vehicles through radio sets, etc.
Yeah.
This is more about business use
Yeah.
rather than the location of people. We've also got the location on officers. Partly as a safety consideration, but also there is an application where we can look and see where people have been. But if there is a village who hasn't had a visit for 37 years, if you give me the details, I'll probably whip along myself this evening just to rectify it.
I'll give you a list. And then, I mean, at one wonderful meeting, they said they'd not seen a police vehicle since I don't know when.
Should have asked them what make it was. And if it was a Morris
well,
Minor.
they also said they'd not seen a police officer. I had a police sergeant and 2 PCSOs sitting at the side of me, and they said, oh, they only come here because you're here. And then I went, at the end of the meeting, we opened the door and a police car went by and they said, oh, you put him there deliberately to come right there. So some people you cannot win with that fear, but anyway, we'll give you the list. Sorry.
And we're also quite confident that that's going to produce savings for future years, and we'll probably see a change in mix of the fleet as well as we go forward.
Is that standard throughout police forces across the country, or are we leading the way here? Or
There's various types of technology. We were one of the first forces in the country to put black boxes on the cars, so all our vehicles have a black box which records, in crude terms, the last 30 seconds of a car's life if it has an accident, because it shows you what speed they're doing, what direction they're going, with the blue lights fitted. At the time you couldn't actually get a 3G card in, so you could constantly monitor the fleet. Some other forces are ahead of the game on this, but we've just put a new contract in place, which is a national contract, so the Met Police are coming on the back of our contract, we believe, because the technology has significantly improved in the last 18 months, so we'll be at the forefront of the latest technology.
I think it's these things, it depends when you jump on the roundabout, doesn't it? So for a while we'll be right at the head of it. The technology moves on.
Yeah.
At some point we won't.
And actually the costs significantly reduced as well in the 2-year period. We were out to tender, the costs significantly reduced of doing it as well, which is good. We then come on to IT. IT is at just around the end of its 5-year strategy. Joint service with Humberside, which has saved roughly £6.5 million in revenue and capital avoidance of £6 million. And the initial strategy was to deliver a set of products which are stated in 11.21. The final piece of that jigsaw now is having gone live with the smart contact system in South Yorkshire. That now needs to go live in Humberside. As a consequence of that, Mark Chivers, who's our new, he's been here a year now, head of IT, has got a draft information technology strategy for the next period. And actually it's building on the data which is being collected by the main systems, Connect, ERP, Smart Contact, to actually start using this data better. So we will have more mobility. Whilst we were at the head of the game on mobility, we have come to the stage where we need to change all our mobile devices used by frontline officers, and they will give them far more functionality to actually work in the communities. It'll give the opportunity for the rationalisation of the estate through agile working, and we'll get better data recording, better performance management information, and there's a project on at the moment to look at how best to actually manage data force-wide. And we'll also be looking at a digital evidence platform which enables us to particularly store and retrieve pictures far more effectively. Because one of the big changes over the period of the IS strategy has been video and still images have become normal business rather than being something which was cost prohibitive, which it was 5 years ago.
And of course next year you've got the body-worn videos will be rolling out across the force, and that's hugely important.
Yeah.
Commissioner, just to mention under IS, there's 2 bits of assurance work that we're, as an office, doing for you with the force. One is around the force's readiness to receive the National Enabling Programme IT system and its affordability, and then the other is around the. Sorry, there was a second area.
It'll come to you.
It will come to me.
Well, when it comes
Police
to
ICT company and the
Yes.
value for money around the police ICT company, because we've been asked to sign up again in relation to that, and I know it's been discussed nationally, but it's in terms of the benefits of that. A few PCCs are questioning the visibility of those benefits, so we're just going to work nationally and with the force, actually demonstrating to our local communities that that is value for money. Apologies for my lack of memory there.
No.
No, the National Enabling Programme,
It's called a
which,
senior moment.
It is.
which in some ways is quite exciting because it provides a secure way for forces and commissioners to operate. We've just had our health check and we had good feedback on that. And the problem is it is dependent upon Microsoft licences, which will increase by £750,000 next year into the organisation. We have no choice on that. So that's it for IT. So moving on, wellbeing.
Just on 11/26, the smart contact has gone live. You're right there. But as far as the public are concerned, they won't notice anything at the moment. The new system is in and it's up and running, and we're confident about that. But the changes that the public will eventually know, that's not happening yet, Lauren. I'm looking at
No,
you.
the first stage has been to change our hardware and give us a more stable operating platform. It also gives us the ability to really drill down into call handling performance, which we weren't able to do previously with the systems because we didn't have the way to extract the data from them readily. The portal for the public will go live next year after the Humberside system is switched over to the new hardware as we have. But we are hoping to test in the next couple of weeks the callback assist functionality, which is where a member of the public rings and can opt to get a call back rather than waiting line for their call to be answered. That is ready to be tested, but we need to test it. But we think we can then roll that out as long as it passes the testing successfully before.
And is that's a kind of an internal testing then you're talking
That's
about?
it,
then?
yeah. So
Not-
we have a sort of testing environment built which replicates all of our systems, so we can feed calls into it and make sure it's working effectively with no detriment to the operating system. So we'll obviously have to make sure that that works effectively before we were to switch it on. But when that does happen, I think that's the point really for us to take the message forward to the public about them then starting to see some of the benefits.
I mean,
At this moment in time, it's very internally focused.
Yeah, it's been a very long wait because of designing the system and then bringing it in and then of course testing it, and we needed to be sure that you got it absolutely right. So far so good, but the public won't notice until next year at some point, but date not yet able to be given.
Not able to be given yet either for the callback assist or the portal. I would like to see the callback assist come in this side of Christmas, but we need to test it and we need to make sure that it passed the test before we go live with it.
Yeah.
It's ready to test. At the moment, it's 2 weeks since we changed our infrastructure. So within Atlas Court, we're still in a period of what we call hypercare. So the suppliers are hypercare. So around the clock, essentially, we've got additional resources who are there in case there's an issue with the operating system. So we need to be able to roll that back, greater levels of confidence around how effectively it's working, and then we can take those resources to test the callback assist functionality. And once we're satisfied that it's past the testing stage, we can put that back into the live environment. So it's about balancing the resource and need against the
Yeah.
risk to the system.
And the messages to the public will be very careful. I know you've got a strategy around that, but that will need very careful handling, obviously.
I don't think we should underestimate, whilst as you kind of highlight, it's not a dramatic impact for the public to see, but
No.
it would have been a dramatic impact if some of these systems had fallen over.
Absolutely.
So it's probably not the most glamorous outwardly of investments, but in terms of ensuring we've got business continuity and security around the systems, it was an absolute imperative. So that's come through so far so good, which, as Lauren says, gives us a lot more stable platform and stops me panicking every time I walk through there and see a big fan on a server.
Absolutely, yes. And a lot of training and retraining has had to go on as well, which again the public don't see, but would notice if it didn't happen. So. Okay.
Right, moving on to wellbeing. Wellbeing, ACC Hartley is leading on wellbeing. There's got a lot of initiatives going on. He's had wellbeing conferences, wellbeing champions to actually look at wellbeing throughout the organisation. And we've also, working jointly with Michelle and her office, significantly improved where we are with health and safety. We've liaised with the trade unions, the staff associations, and for the first time we've actually published an annual report on the website which shows where we are with health and safety, what accidents we've had and what we've learnt about it, which is all in line with best practice from the HSE. And we'll then come on to demand, and we give some examples of how working with the ambulance service and football planning has produced better results for us. And I know you've had a lot of reports from Laura on the demand work and the problem solving policing. And the last section is human resources. As you know, we've had areas of concern in relation to this from HMIC. One of those has been signed off. We're confident that when HMIC come in on the 12th of December, the second and last, one of those will get signed off. And we've had a significant programme where our workforce planning has improved. And as part of the budget process, the strategic planning process, you'll see the benefits of that next week. Paragraph 12.16 is just a very simple slide put together by the head of HR, which shows the principal things which have been achieved in the last 12 months, what's currently in progress, and what's going to happen shortly after that. And I think, as you can see, in a very concise way, you can see what significant progress has been made since Joe's appointment. That's it, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Just going back to well-being, my well-being room is the kitchen because I enjoy cooking. That's when I forget about everything else and get on with the job. Is there a science around these well-being rooms, or do you just add in?
There's some work being done at the moment because the one over there has been highlighted as you'd probably feel worse. You'd probably feel worse going in there than
as I recall.
Yeah. So Dave is working with occupational health, which we are putting more resources into, and departmental heads to find more suitable places.
I was thinking of the thought and the care that went into the refurbishment of the sexual assault referral centre, pastoral shades and type of furniture, all sorts of things. I guess that's the similar thing here, isn't it?
Yeah, there's been work done on colours. One of the districts is Doncaster, wasn't it? He's done work into IKEA, bought some cheap furniture, some pastel colours, and it's made a big difference.
Value furniture, actually.
Other furniture providers are available.
Yeah.
We used to call them bars.
Right, not putting bars in.
On the windows.
Yes, I would.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. Are there any
I just think we wanted to mark the progress that Joe Jackson had made, especially in relation to HMIC, FRS gradings. There's been a lot of work done there, hasn't there, in relation to workforce planning and financial planning coming together. And Lauren, in relation to managing the issues around smart contact. It's been a complex set of issues to manage, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It was very comprehensive. There was a lot in there, and I think for the future, probably what we'll be doing is concentrating on a few things and asking for some more specific answers to questions around that act. But it was good to have that comprehensive overview. Thank you very much indeed. On to PCC Strategic and Financial Planning. 13 is Strategic Planning Update. Erica is not here, so
Well, I thought if I
this you?
take item 14, Commissioner, and then that'll wrap up most
Police and
of
Crime Plan
item
Priorities
30.
14, Michelle.
It's
And
in
that's
the,
the
supplemental pack. It's been distributed. Hopefully, members of the public to my right have received a supplemental pack. It's item 14. Thank you. It's just a brief report, Commissioner, to mark where we are in our annual planning process. You are required to keep your police and crime plan under review and to refresh it if necessary. So 3.2 talks to the fact that after the May 2016 elections, when you were re-elected, you put in place a plan which renewed priorities you'd already had previously, 3 priorities, which appear at the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2. Protecting vulnerable people, tackling crime and ASB and social behaviour, and treating people fairly. And those have remained a constant throughout your term of office, quite deliberately. But there are things that have changed that you wanted to mark in the Police and Crime Plan refresh, which will be published in March, April of next year. Firstly, that demand on the police is growing and changing, as I think every performance report that comes before you demonstrates. Secondly, that government funding in real terms for policing is reducing, which, as Nigel's report showed you, has stark implications for South Yorkshire in terms of its reduced funding position and how much of the funding here relies on local taxpayers and the legacy issues that South Yorkshire uniquely is carrying. And then thirdly, that public services are shrinking elsewhere, which means that a lot of demand is pushed towards the police as the service of last resort, sometimes only resort. There are then, at paragraph 4.3, a number of areas of focus which are emerging from the forces analysis, but also what you are picking up in terms of public concerns as you go around South Yorkshire's communities. And they are listed there. So serious violent crime, especially knife crime, is an area in South Yorkshire that you want to try and focus on in terms of what you're asking the Chief Constable to police. Gangs and drug use you've mentioned in relation to spice especially. And then protecting vulnerable people has areas of focus which are listed there. The last one in that list, child criminal exploitation, is an emerging area which we're working with the force on understanding, because the focus in other police areas is not necessarily the focus in terms of what we're seeing here. Burglary and other acquisitive crime, we've talked about spice. The policing of protest, we've seen policing of protest in relation to trees in Sheffield this year. And of course anti-fracking protests may arise next year and in subsequent years in relation to various planning applications being granted in our area. Improved community engagement is something that you want to see, and an improved 101 service. Commissioner, we're a couple of months ahead of ourselves in terms of the planning timetable this year, and you've actually given to the Chief Constable a draft narrative of the things you want to say following what the analysis that we've done in the office. The Chief Constable and his command team are going to give us comments over the next few weeks. Meanwhile, the Deputy Chief Constable and I have looked at that list, and the Deputy Chief Constable's concerned that we really need to focus that activity. The force have a plan on a page, as you know, and a detailed performance framework underneath that. So we're going to work together over the coming weeks to make sure we're not adding to the things that we're requiring of the force. We're having sharper focus around those things that really ought to be a priority that still meet your ambitions for the communities here.
Did that narrative that I wrote, I just sat down and wrote it all out, did it have such a long list of stuff in it then?
Yes. They're all clearly, they're all things that we're concerned about. They're all relevant. I think, just thinking back to what Scott said, there'll be different relevance in different part of the county. So whereas Barnsley clearly have made some significant strides with burglary, they've got an issue in the town centre with spice. So I think we just need to make sure that we tier them appropriately, so that things might feature in different levels and different places for different people. But as you've made the point, the resources that are available to us aren't going to get any better. The demands that are being placed on us as other services constrict are probably going to get tighter. So we just need to be realistic, I think, in identifying the priorities, because clearly the point of the priority is that that then becomes a magnet for resource. So we just need to give it that due consideration, so that we're not, you know, either over-promising or missing the point on some.
No, I think insofar as I had a list, or there are things identifiable in that way, I mean, there'd be nothing in there that you wouldn't be doing.
No, absolutely.
Because it's all about policing. So within that, I think then we extract those things which we want to bring here, in a sense,
Absolutely.
and ensure that we've got means of measuring and knowing how to evaluate.
And there's
that.
nothing on the list that we're not going to give a degree of prioritisation. It's just, you know, we've referenced the CCE. Now, for us, it's a different issue, perhaps, to some other forces.
Yeah.
We're understanding our problem locally and trying to come up with solutions and an approach that's proportionate, hits all the marks, but equally we don't want to throw resource in a disproportionate way.
No,
So it's just that
I
fine
agree.
balance, and I think this year collectively, with the OPCC and the force, we're probably more structured and comprehensive in looking at these things than ever before.
I hope that's true, and partly there's an education of the public locally as well, because I think people hear from national media that something is an issue. Well, it may be an issue, but it's not an issue here in quite the same way that it is in metropolitan capital, London or Manchester or wherever. And I think it's being mutually helpful. I mean, County Lines is a very good example, and County Lines plays out here quite differently from other parts of the country, and that sort of thing. That's fine. Okay.
In terms of strategic planning update generally, there's obviously the other parallel line progressing with the plan refresh is the budget setting. Mike, I don't know whether you want to say anything around that process.
Yeah, I can just add a little further information. I mean, we're in the throes of the determining next year's budget requirements and also the medium-term resource strategy, which is effectively our financial plan to the year 2022. So looking ahead, and some of the key variables and key assumptions within that will be the workforce and the profile of that workforce in meeting the demand pressures, and also the police and crime plan priorities which we just outlined. Critically though, our funding is controlled by central government, so the level of policing grant, government grant, and also the council tax precept and the flexibility for any increase in the council tax precept are critical to understanding our sort of level of resource, particularly for next year. We're due that information from government provisionally on the 6th of December, so we await that with eager anticipation. It's particularly critical for the next financial year ahead. We trailed this issue in the last PAB meeting. Then we have the uncertainty regarding the pensions issue for the police force nationally as a sector. We've calculated a potential impact for South Yorkshire. We await to see, and these are the messages from the Home Office to us, that all will be revealed in the settlement announcement then, in terms of the extent to which we may have to fund a gap through either additional savings, whether there's some direct government funding, or whether, thirdly, the council tax precepts will need to increase by potentially greater than the already trailed £12 increase on the Band D properties. So 12 months ago in the settlement, there was an indication for not just 2018-19 and current year, but also for 2019-20, but in both those years, a £12 Band D equivalent council tax precept increase will be possible. So we await that final detail. So currently we're just working on some of the scenarios in terms of refreshing the budget and the medium-term resource strategy, depending on the range of options in terms of the funding to us. We'll be informing the next PAB meeting, which is on the 18th of December, because we should have the settlement information by then, and that will help to inform the precept consultation proposals for 1920. That's an agenda item for for December's PAB, and then the end of January's PAB then will formally cover then the budget and the recommended precept increase prior to then the discussion with Police and Crime Panel on the 4th of February. So they're sort of key milestones looking ahead.
And Commissioner, just finally, the Police and Crime Panel have members here, the Chair and the Vice Chair are here, and Councillor Frost. The panel have a budget working group which Mike attends with staff pulled in as and when we require them, so that the panel know what's coming in terms of some of the budget issues. We're taking both the Police and Crime Plan draft narrative and the precept proposal from you in due course through the panel.
Thank you. It is interesting, when I first became Commissioner, all the pressure from central government was on keeping the council tax precept down. Now all the pressure is you must put it up to the maximum that we allow you because of the financial situation, but all very interesting. Just one thing, I think one of the other things we're getting better at is aligning our strategies as a force now with other people's. I was at a meeting in Sheffield Town Hall yesterday where Jim Stanker is here from the council, where they were launching their strategy on domestic abuse and serious sexual violence. And they had consulted with the police. The police were there, made a presentation, very good presentation, on what they're doing, PVP. And the two were aligned, and they talked to us about our police and crime plan. So we're getting better at that, I think, with partners and their priorities and their strategies. So that was a really good occasion yesterday. And of course it included predominantly the voluntary and community sector as well. Okay, that was, I think, everything then on item 14, Police and Crime Plan priorities. Precept consultation and engagement plan 63 to 68. Fiona, do you want to?
Yeah, just an information report really to let you know that we are on with the consultation process. Things that we're picking up, and we'll have a plan for getting people's opinions, and once we have a figure on, as Michael alluded to, around the figure for the precept for the actual amount of precept. Consultation is something that we do all year for all our engagement events. We ask about value for money and if people are prepared to pay more, and I think it can probably best be described as a reluctant acceptance at the moment that we've received all year from the public. I think they're well aware of austerity, they know the pressures on public services at the moment, and fully expecting it to rise. So that goes on all year, so get their opinions on there, and you'll see a number of consultations and things that comments that have come through. We're also continuing that over the next month, and as soon as we know the figures and what its likely impact on the public will be, and we've got that figure to put in, whether it's £12 or whatever, we'll consult on that figure through an online survey as well as face-to-face. We're just in the process of finalising some events. We've got a couple in for January, we want a few more in between, and quite cover all the districts and some of the local areas between once we get the announcement and the time the report has to be prepared. To make your recommendations. An online survey will go out as well, and will run for a number of weeks through our social media, and hopefully with support from the South Yorkshire Police as well, because your following's a lot more members of the public than probably ours is, and a wider reach. So if we can have some support on putting that out there, that'd be really appreciated.
Not claiming this is totally scientific, but it's kind of dipping your toe in the water a little bit, but it does give us some sense of what people are saying and where they're at. And as we do it every year, then you can compare one year with another in that more subjective way.
I think the key thing coming out is what people want, so the one we hear more and more is the visibility in communities. But as I said earlier, that visibility is, sometimes they just don't see it when it's there, and it is there. We can see that officers are out and about, and we can see that presence increasing in neighbourhood areas. That is what they seem to, that's the key thing that comes out from members of the public at the moment.
The one thing I would say is that in the community meetings that I've had in the last 12 months or so, there's much more of a realism on the part of the public as to what the police can and cannot do, given the pressures you're under and the stretching of the resources that are available. And I would say that people are well aware now of what the true position is as far as resources are concerned.
Possibly underlines the point we made earlier, though, that the fact that we've managed to make the investment back in neighbourhood, because people understand that the pie's smaller, I guess, but they just expect us to make the best use possible of what we've got. So we kind of make the point that I think the reinvestment in neighbourhood policing is our bit of that equation, that we are using it wisely and as the public would like us to, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was item 15. 16, options for fire and rescue services governance. Michelle, do you want to say?
Yeah.
So this is the supplemental pack.
Yeah, back to the supplemental pack, apologies. Agenda item 16. Yeah. Police and fire collaboration. Last month, Commissioner, I brought a report that explained the collaboration that had been going on between police and fire and what had been achieved through a collaboration board which you chair, and the fact that you have been on the Fire and Rescue Authority as a voting member since January 2017. What that report also trailed is that you'd commissioned your office to work with an independent consultant to appraise the options that were available under the Policing and Crime Act of 2017, which mandates greater collaboration between the emergency services, but also allows police and crime commissioners nationally to have a greater involvement in the governance of fire and rescue services locally, where a local case is made in the interests of economy, efficiency, effectiveness, and public safety. So we went away and we appraised those options factually. We looked at areas that had looked into this and proposed to the Home Secretary a change in governance model. So the advantages and disadvantages there, rather than reinvent the wheel. You came up with a list of critical success factors about what you were looking for in South Yorkshire, which I'll come to in a moment. And then the independent consultant and I conducted 9 structured interviews with various stakeholder groups. All 4 local authorities were interviewed, 1 elected member and 1 officer. Various chief officers were interviewed. The police and crime panel members gave me some time, and we had a structured interview with members. And the unions, the fire unions, all came together in a room, and we had a really constructive conversation there. So the cover report is just talking about the process. The report is now available at Appendix A to the cover report. It has a frontispiece from you, which I know you'll come to in a moment. So turning to page 7 of the supplemental pack is where the report proper begins, and there's an executive summary there which talks about the South Yorkshire Leaders Meeting and the desire to work with stakeholders in the options appraisal. The background on page 8 sets out the various models that are provided for under the Policing and Crime Act 2017. We have the representation model in South Yorkshire already, which is you as a voting member on the Fire and Rescue Authority. So that's our do-nothing option. And we looked at the governance and a single employer model in terms of advantages and disadvantages of moving to those. Page 9 is a repeat of what came in the October PAB report, which is what other areas are doing, with mayors having taken police and fire responsibilities since 2000 and 2017 in London and Greater Manchester respectively, and PCCs having taken responsibilities in the various areas since the 2017 Act was passed. Page 10 and 11 talk to the activities and the progress that's been made already with collaboration in South Yorkshire, which was part of my October PAB report. Page 11 then really gets into why a change in governance might be needed in South Yorkshire, and there's 3 reasons, as you know, I think in 3s. The first is around the current pace. So are you, Commissioner, satisfied with the current pace of progress? You heard from the Forces Director of Resources in relation to the recruitment of head of estates, for instance. The current ambition is the second area. You have set out in the Police and Crime Plan your ambition for South Yorkshire, really getting ahead of issues, early intervention and prevention before matters become an issue for the police to resolve. And we've heard about the increased demand on policing services, where really we want other agencies to be preventing and intervening in those issues at the outset. So the ambition is great. Can we achieve it with the current governance model as it is the question. Efficiency as well. We know that obviously authority members have attract allowances and expenses. They have to go through training development. They have a support network around them. So with the abolition of authorities alone elsewhere in the country, savings have been made in respect of that. But there are other efficiencies to be had, especially around support services. The unions do push back around the dilution of core purposes of fire and police, where you start looking at collaboration in the operational area. But certainly in support services, there are efficiencies to be had there, and they've been had elsewhere in the country. So those are the three areas that the consultation took us to. Then each of the models are described there in terms of the advantages and disadvantages of the governance and the single employer model. And I won't go through those. Page 17, I mentioned earlier critical success factors that you were keen that ought to be part of the collaboration programme, and that we therefore looked at in terms of the competing advantages and disadvantages of each of those three models. So a model that allows clear strategic aims to drive transformation is number one on page 17. 2, the provision of effective and timely decision making in support of these strategic aims. And some of the interviewees talked to the delay in some decision making that occurs when the Fire and Rescue Authority seized of a decision, but the full authority need to meet to be able to make that decision, because the chair in law is not able to have delegated to him the authority to make decisions at your collaboration board. Thirdly, the improved and more visible oversight, scrutiny and public accountability. There is a Fire and Rescue Authority, as there is you for policing, but there is nothing over and above it, as there is the Police and Crime Panel for policing and crime issues. Fourthly, the greater pace, breadth and depth of collaboration to achieve transformative change. And 5, better use of resources to allow reinvestment in frontline services. So those are the critical success factors that, if you go then to Appendix B, the models are run through, if you like, looking at each of those critical success factors with a RAG rating of red, amber, green in relation to...
Attention everybody, there will be an email coming round, but can you just bear in mind that until 4 o'clock today, could you possibly, or could you use the rotating door and not the normal access door, please, just due to the weather. So from now on, just use the rotating door. Thank you.
Red, amber and green rating in Appendix B tells you where each of those critical success factors comes out when run through those three models. Page 18 then just gives a very high-level summary of the themes that came out of the structured interviews, the 9 structured interviews, and the OPCC comment in relation to those issues, should you proceed with any proposal for a change in governance. So that's really a whiz through the report. You asked for it to be brief, you asked for it to be a high-level report. There's obviously work and interview details that sit behind this. But it's a summary report for you to have a look at that, and you asked for it not to come deliberately to a conclusion, but for you then to decide next steps.
Thank you very much. And the next steps are on the second page of the report, where I give my response to it. I'm sorry we couldn't get this out to everybody before the meeting, or at least earlier in the process, but I hope people will take it away and read it. Perhaps I could place on record my thanks to all those who were interviewed or were contacted and gave their responses to it, and that was a very big range of people, from district council leaders through to chief officers of the 2 services, the trade unions, all sorts of interested parties in that way. It's been a very good exercise. It wasn't a formal consultation quite that way, but I wanted to know what people felt and what people thought about it. The key question for me, I think, at the end of all this is, can we do with the existing governance arrangements all that we would like to do without having to move to another form of governance arrangement? Or is there something about what we have at the moment which fatally floors us? And I think what people were saying back to me was they think it can be done with the present model. And I've concluded by saying, okay then, if it can be done with the present model, let's deliver, let's see that happen. And the areas that concerned me were particularly around ambition and around the pace and the urgency of collaboration. And the thing that I think slows it down is the fact that when we're making those decisions around the room with the present model, where we have the Police and Fire Collaboration Board, we have present in the room 4 people, 3 of whom can make a decision there and then, the Chief Constable, the Chief Fire Officer, myself, but the Chair of the Fire Authority can't. He has to go back to the Fire Authority members, get their approval. That may take a time. They may want to do something else before they come back to the founders, and it's just slowing the whole process down. And I feel that is a real shame. And also the chair changes every 2 years, and you're in the hands therefore of the new chair, who takes 6 months to learn the job, another year to find out what the strategic priorities are going to be. Before you know it, where you are, you're on to the next chair. So that kind of ambition is lost in all of that. If we're going to drive this collaboration through, then I think they're the areas that concern me. So my conclusion is, yes, I think we can't move to the single employer model. I think that just causes too many distractions, and I don't think either the police or the fire would be very happy with that. I think the governance model, therefore, it is an obvious place to go to. That takes out the fire authority, and the Police and Crime Commission assumes the role of the fire authority. Essentially, that's what that means. And I think that is the model that would drive this at some pace and some urgency. But there are lots of vested interests, and there are people saying, hold on a minute, we think we can deliver with what we've got. So I put this back to the fire authority, and I said, if you can find a way of being able to speed up these decisions and enable us to get cracking on this with a bit more determination about it, then okay, we can live with what we've got. But if we can't demonstrate that, then I think we do have to look to that alternative model. That will involve me politically in having to persuade my party that this is the right place to go, because nationally I'm not at all sure that the Labour Party's position is entirely clear on this. And the reason it's not entirely clear is because we already have Labour police and crime commissioners in the form of mayors, elected mayors, but not in the form of PCCs, with a kind of governance model. And that's muddying the waters a little bit. So I think we want some better strategic thinking nationally before we can take that further. But this is where I'm at. So I'm ruling out the single employer model. I'm saying the governance model, from my point of view, seems to offer the most effective way forward. But for the time being, I'm putting it back to the fire authority and saying, can we make the present arrangements where we have the Police and Fire Collaboration Board, can we make that work with a bit more pace and urgency about it? So that's essentially where we're at. Police and fire authority members had the report on Monday, and they were meeting in a closed session after I left the room on Monday to discuss it and to come to a conclusion about that, and we haven't heard anything yet from them, so I don't know what the answer is.
But that is why the report couldn't be released until yesterday.
Today, yeah. But I do thank those who've helped us, and we will be ensuring now that this report is widely circulated.
Could I just
Yes.
clarify? I mean, I don't know whether I was the only one who didn't quite understand, but legally, did I understand you to say, Michelle, that the chair of the Fire and Rescue Authority cannot make decisions on behalf of the Fire and Rescue Board?
That's the legal advice that they have. Yes.
So how does A come into the picture at all? Alan's.
Oh, I mean, I'm not saying let's have a change of your arrangements in that sense. I just want you as a fire authority to say to your chair, we will back you in those meetings so that we can move the thing on, and that's all we're doing really.
Can I just give an example, Commissioner? It might help.
Yeah.
So there's been a decision in relation to the heads of functions. I think if we were able to have
Joint working, you mean? The
joint
three joint
functions,
appointments,
yes. So we've got fleet, facilities management.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we've got four, haven't we? Fleet, estates, facilities management within estates, and community safety. We've got joint appointments. There's been conversations around what that would mean when those people come into post. So the ambition is to have joint functions, I think, from the Commissioner's point of view, and to be able to make efficiencies from having joint functions as soon as possible. Now, if the Fire Authority and the Chair had those discussions up front so that they knew what an appointment, a joint appointment, would then lead to, then the Fire Authority could say, right, we agree that this is the path, the journey that we're on, which means that every time the Chair comes to a collaboration board, anything that gets along that journey is approved because the in-principle decisions are being taken up front. And I think that's what the Commissioner means about empowering in principle a journey that then we can get on with making happen, rather than at every stage of that journey having to keep going back for decision.
I think it has built-in delays, and that's been very frustrating for everybody concerned. And I imagine it's analogous to the position of the leaders. I go to the leaders meeting, which are held, I think, once a quarter. So you've got the leaders of each of the district councils present in the room, who will be making decisions on behalf of their councils. And I assume it's analogous, that actually they've still got to go back and, I mean, if their council said, no, we're not going to back that, that would be very difficult. So they have the authority to make those decisions on behalf of their councils. It's something like that that I'm asking for. If we can do that, then I think we can make some progress. But without that, I think the pressure to move to the governance model is very strong.
Thank you. A completely different point. I'm sure Melvin would be making this point as well if he were here. The Audit and Risk Committee and the Ethics Panel obviously have no role at all at the moment in relation to fire and rescue, but that's an area which may need a little bit of exploration, whatever now happens, I would have thought. Just to leave that hanging there, and what a solution.
Yeah, I think Erica is looking at it as part of her assurance mapping.
Yeah.
Anything else? Exhausted. Thank you very much. So that was options for fire and rescue services. Other assurance reports by section. ICVs, independent custody visitors. Erica is not here. So is it Sally? Is it you? 69, pages 69 to whatever, 76.
You've got the report, Chair, that's about 6 months since we had the last report from the independent custody visitors. Which is a little bit of background to the scheme, which is a statutory function that you have to run. It's a really good scheme. You have got a lot of really good volunteers who are really keen, and it's not the most pleasant of voluntary roles, but they do it with gusto and they really get involved in that. There's just a few exceptions that they raise around that they causing a few problems over the last 12 to 6 months really. One of them is around the Connect IT system, and there's a few issues. One of them around them not being able to get a list when they go into custody around who's actually being detained at the time. And I know it's something that they are working on in the force and trying to be able to develop a programme that they can run that information off, and we're trying to find a workaround at the moment. Chief Inspector has been heavily involved in that and is trying to progress that for us. They're also, because we've now gone to electronic custody records, and that's part of they used to have handwritten ones, which weren't brilliant because you couldn't always read the writing. But now with the Connect system provides them with too much information, really, and because they get all the stuff that they shouldn't have, and all the stuff that take quite a lot of time to look through. The way they view it, they have to be with a detention officer, and that's tying up a detention officer. So they're really, really conscious about that, and they really, they appreciate how busy the staff are, and they don't want to be tying them up for that length of time. So again, it's something that we're trying to resolve around that. Doncaster Custody Suite is something that they keep mentioning. That everybody knows it's one of the oldest properties within the estate, and it's something that's been looked at as part of the capital programme. On a positive note, we had an annual training event for all the ICVs a few few weeks ago. That was really well received, and very much thanks to the training department at Robert Dyson House, who provided us with some trainers and talked about the use of force, mental health and children in custody, which was really good. Future work is around the animal welfare scheme, which we do the dog welfare scheme as a matter of course. We did do the mounted section, but obviously that went to West Yorkshire. It's now come back, so we need to pick that up and look at how we can do that again. There's a new quality assurance framework for all custody visiting schemes that's been pushed through by the Independent Custody Visiting Association, and that will then get accreditation for, and it's got different levels. So we're working around that, making sure that we're compliant and looking at what we can potentially achieve moving forward. We've also looked at tweaking the ICV report forms, because we don't always get these filled in particularly correctly. Although it's improved a lot, and you'll see that attached to Appendix A is actually an annual report, which is the first time we've really produced something like that. But again, it's not 100% accurate because of the forms that are currently being produced, so we're trying to make that a little bit better and a bit more accurate, but it's good progress for actually we're able to say how many visits we've done, what sort of things they're picking up. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I think we ought to thank yourself, Sally, I'm perhaps took it a minute this, and Leah, who's now Leah Crowley from my office, who's also now involved with this, and indeed place on record our thanks to all the custody visitors. I did go to the annual training event, and very impressed by the quality of our independent custody visitors there, and they give such a huge amount of their own personal time to do this, and they do it very thoroughly, and they're very passionate about it, and they want to get it right for everybody, not only those who are there in the custody suite against their will, but also those who are doing this, you know, as their day job. And I was very impressed by that. A member of your ethics committee, of course, Michael Lewis, is prominent amongst those. But they're a very thoughtful group of people, and I think they really do a good job for us. Yes, animal welfare. I do hope you can sort somebody out there, because the person who did dogs previously was very passionate about dogs. And you want a passionate horse person. Yeah. Just one thing I wondered. There are no visitors between the hours of 11 p.m. and 7 a.m.
No.
I just wondered.
I am trying to get them to do that.
Oh, that's because, right.
They don't particularly, they've not got their act together to actually visit in the evening at that late at night at the moment.
No,
it's something we keep bringing up and trying to encourage them to do at least one visit a year
Unlike duty solicitors, they're not paid to do it.
No, they're not paid to do it, and it's a big sacrifice.
I mean, it is a little bit around how many people are actually awake at that time of night. You know, are we going to be disturbing detainees? Although I don't think there's that much sleeping goes on in detention cells. So
Actually, that is an issue.
yeah.
It might be just have a look at where the spikes are in terms of visits to the custody suite. I guess around about 2 a.m. might be one thing, but I don't know. And I might have to go myself and see them. But thank you very much indeed, and I'm glad they're doing an annual report. That's right. Is there a police comment, or are you?
Chief Inspector Aziz, who's the custody lead, did respond to the report with some notes to us, but to be fair, Sally's covered most of those off in terms of the Connect issues. So in terms of the list of people that are in custody, they've got a fix which is printing off the whiteboard, which is essentially a screenshot, but it doesn't have the full level of information that ICVs are used to having from the old system, which is one of the issues they're working around. At this moment, we're not able to resolve the issue about them being able to view the record unaccompanied, but all the detention officers know that the ICVs are a priority, obviously barring operational need, and that's got to be accommodated, so they're all kind of aware of that and working to it.
Are our numbers healthy?
They are at the moment, because we've just recruited another 9, but prior to that we were getting quite low. We've actually recruited quite a few students from the universities. This time we're doing things like criminology or law, or wanting they'll only perhaps be here for a couple of years, but it gives them experience, and it also gives us a new lease of life and some new thinking as well. So I think that's really positive at the moment. But we're always recruiting really, because people do it for so long, and then we had quite a lot of older people who have actually retired from the scheme in a way, that have been doing it for a number of years. some of them 20 years.
I remember taking a bunch of flowers to honour it, and
Yeah.
Vera was, I've forgotten her age, we won't mention it publicly, but
She was wearing
Early
90s.
90s, yeah. And she's still around, bless her, and we still keep in contact with her.
oh good. Thank you very much indeed. That was 17 then, so the final item of business is 18 PCC decision report 77 to 78.
Yeah, Commissioner, you've just made 3 decisions since the last pad. One is around the contact management system, just to authorise a change in the contract. These are what we're asking for. Body-worn video rollout and staff survey. I don't know whether any of the colleagues wants to say anything about what those two bring, especially.
Looking at diary management, it's probably self-evident. It hopefully gives us a better quality of service to the public, so we're going at a mutually convenient time, because some things can be scheduled. Body-worn video, we've discussed on a number of occasions. I think it's something we are really keen to get in place because it's got lots of positives in terms of better outcomes, in terms of demonstrating the integrity of interactions with the public. It tends to reduce complaints, so it's something that we do really need to address and get in place.
Thank you very much. I think that's everything. Any other business? If not, thank you very much. Our next meeting is mince pie on the 18th of December. Thank you very much.
Did we have a